This is a video about history and technology and culture all colliding in the fascinating vessel of little tiny choo-choo trains. We're going to take a look at and play with this stuff, some extremely unique sound generators and synthesizers from the late 1960s that delivered audio signals on the electric line used to propel model trains. So if you had thousands of dollars to spare 40 years ago, you could make your model train sound like this. And yeah, that's probably a little bit underwhelming if you're used to hearing stuff like this, which is why I popped open a bottle of whiskey and soldered the fuck out of this stuff so we could get sounds that sound a little bit more like this. Well then, all aboard. Hold on to your... What do you call the seat that a train engineer or conductor sits in? Hold on to your AARM-1003 certified power rail locomotive seats. Okay, so let's go back to the year 1965, probably. If you're familiar with this channel, then you probably know that I get really obsessive with research, and believe it or not, this video was actually really difficult to research, mostly because everybody involved with the creation of these original devices is dead, which is kind of spooky and convenient now that I think about it. All right, so the year is probably 1965, and a prominent IBM engineer named Robert Longnecker, aka Choo Choo Bob Longnecker. I am trying to make a serious film about train synths. Get out. It would be safe to assume that this nickname was derived from his interest and maybe even obsession with model trains. Bob decided to take a break from inventing DRAM or whatever IBM was doing at the time and instead make model trains sound like real trains. And I can't figure out the exact timeline, but over the next few years, Bob worked with a company called PFM, or Pacific Fast Mail, to do just that. It is worth noting that synthesizers weren't exactly popular and were pretty obscure when Bob was first developing this stuff. And on the other side of the country, another Bob was designing what would become the first Moog synthesizers. But the main PFM sound system wasn't just a sound system, it was a clever redesign of the master drive controller for a model train set. Inside this type of model train, there's a tender drive, which picks up electric power that's distributed through the tracks, and it keeps the train moving without needing any wires connected or internal battery. This controller allowed you to not only increase the power to the tender drive, but it would synthesize audio in sync with the amount of power that you were sending. And then, incredibly, it would convert AC to DC and send audio over the DC power line to the train, which would then be played from a small speaker that would be installed inside the model train and traveling around the tracks with it. That's pretty cool. Then there's the quadratape unit, which I'm not sure why it's called quadratape because there's 3 tape decks, but apparently you can piggyback 3 of these and have 9 total tape loops going to reproduce virtually any sound that you could think of coming out of a real train. It's been really hard to verify what the original pricing was, but I believe that the PFM Mark II had originally retailed for $1,500, which was like the cost of a Volkswagen at the time. When you adjust that for inflation, that's like $12,000 or $13,000. So it would be reasonable to assume that anybody who owned this at the time was not hungry. I simply cannot find any information that tells me how much the quadratape or the smaller synthesizer unit cost or retailed for when they were first released. But it seems like they weren't selling well and they had some overstock because they were liquidated for quite a lot less in a catalog that came out in like the mid-70s. Unfortunately, Choo Choo Bob died of lung cancer in 2004, and when I was trying to piece this historical puzzle together, I started stalking some of his surviving family members to see if I could find any information or photos. And believe it or not, his grandson is popular train and sometimes music YouTuber Heiss.
My granddad made the first model train sound systems.
Heiss actually made a video about another train sound machine his grandfather made later on, the PBL foreground sound system, which was an improvement for the train stuff itself and has its own interesting features, which you can watch in Heiss's video, which I'll link below. But since it seems to be mostly digital, it's probably not going to be as appealing for mouth breathers like myself and my viewers. So yeah, you want to check it out with me? Come on.
In the beginning, click double serve.
I'll show you the innards of this after my little demonstration here, because I'm so scared that if I just lift this up, again, something might become disjointed and then we'll be done. This thing just makes insane noise on its own. It's turned way up when I'm doing that. That's coming from the Doppler effect from the exhaust. So let's turn that all the way down, turn the exhaust up. We have cutoff. We have tone, volume, and then Doppler is pretty cool. And then there's a resonance peak. Then there's a generator, which is like the most awful sound that this thing makes, I think. Then we have a blower and coupling, and I believe that those are coming in from tapes that I don't have hooked up. But here's wheel noise. I don't have wheel noise on the tape. I actually just have some ambience from outside. This side of the tape is a little more screwed up. This is the bell. I'm assuming that everything up here in this area is just tape controls, because you can have up to 3 of these machines for 9 total tapes if you're a fucking psychopath. We could output to echo and reverb, which I found some old cave drawings of how that works. I'm not really sure how echo fits into this at all. The reverb is under here, and I'll show you that at the end of this, that it's a spring reverb unit that I plan to use for other things because it has standard RCA in and out. For the way that I have all of this hooked up, it would have just made things more complicated and noisy, so I just opted out of it for now. Throttle and direction and acceleration and deacceleration will do nothing because that's being filtered out in a little transformer that I made here, so I'm not sending lots of electricity to my mixer. And then we have hiss, and a different type of hiss. If you like your hisses, a nice white noise party. Now for my favorite part. This has a highly customizable whistle. And I've disabled this potentiometer because I wanted this whistle to go to an external output so I could play with it. And this basically changes the pitch of the overall whistle. So this is 5 different tone generators. I'm becoming quite a pro at this. Okay, so moving on to the older and less complicated, crazy one. There is no tapes in here. There is a bell sound, but it's an analog tone generator. Got some noise. Again, the throttle and direction, those aren't audio generators, that's just power going to the tracks, and I've filtered that out. Here we go. The whistle generator on this one's simpler, but still fun. All right, let's verb it up. Okay. So we have a spring reverb, and it's mono, but you could see the spring. Well, let me use this camera. I think I'm going to keep this. Actually, let's open it up real fast. I'm gonna need a bigger tool. That's what she said. There you go. So that's the front of it. Pop this off. So I cleaned this up really good and soldered some of the joints from the synthesizer parts to go out to here. And then this could easily be expanded on with something like this, maybe something that actually fits it. And then that could go to a breadboard and then audio out and so on. When I first opened this up, I saw these capacitors and was like, nope, absolutely not touching this at all. And then I looked at the actual rating of them and it's 35 volts and 4,700 microfarads, which is not that crazy. I love things like this because it's such a good testament to how much more efficient electronics are now. A capacitor with similar specs now would be like maybe that big. By the way, if you're not into electronics and you don't know or care what a capacitor is, this information is really important. If you ever open something up and you see things that look like this, they store electricity and they can be dangerous. If you see a capacitor this size on something that's made after, I don't know, the year 2000 or so, probably an HVAC or something like that is where you would see those. And if you touch it when it's charged, you will meet your maker. Now, of course, you can manually discharge them, and that still can be dangerous, and I've gotten shocked a whole bunch of times doing it. I would just say, don't touch these unless you know what you're doing. So the quadra-tape inputs are serial ports. By the way, these are not XLR adapters covered up by something. They're for power. When I first saw this unit online, I thought that you'd be able to just get the audio from the reverb outputs. You cannot, unfortunately. There's another output over here that's not really covered in the documentation, and it seems like these outputs only work when you have a proper amount of power coming out and back into the unit from the tracks. It's basically, I don't really know why it does that. It wouldn't be a safety thing. If anything, it would make it less safe. Speaking of safety, while messing around with electronics, especially outside of the case, I was happy to see that there's a fuse and a reset button. All right, it's a quadra tape. And we have a fuse back here as well. I got them all working. This one was honestly the worst, but check this out. Boom. This one is the older of the bunch, and it worked fine. I didn't need to open it up for anything. Similar situation with the fuse and the reset switch and the outputs that have power that need to be filtered before you bring them into something. Every switch on this thing is super smooth. Probably smoother than anything you would buy today. Some of the potentiometers are a little sticky, meaning that they sound a little bit crackly when you turn them, but that can usually be fixed with a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol. I guess I'm just always happy to see something as old as I am that's not as fucked up by time as I am. That was fun. I reached out to Heiss to see if he wanted me to send this stuff to him, because it is his grandfather's legacy after all, but unsurprisingly, he already has most of it, and I really would like to see it go to good use because I'm so busy that it's probably just gonna collect dust here. So I reached out to some local model train and electrical engineering groups to see if anybody has any clever ideas for what they could do with it. I was vaguely familiar with the model train sound generators years ago, as more people seem to be into model trains years ago than they are now. I am not into model trains personally, but I would like to thank Mikey303 for sort of reintroducing me to this parallel universe of synthesizers. I would also like to thank AIAIAI for sending me kind of a little birthday bundle of these wireless headphones and the wireless monitors that are in the other room. Those are nice. And of course, I would like to thank my Patreon members because this video would not be possible without you. And if you want access to an amazing community with monthly songwriting challenges and unreleased music and field recordings and audio assets, then my Patreon is for you, and you can join for as little as $1. Also, one thing I'm going to have to point out for every single Patreon call of action from now on is that if you are an Apple user using an iPhone or an iPad and you are using Apple Pay or Apple's payment gateway to sign up for my Patreon or anybody's Patreon, you will be charged an extra 30 or so percent, or your creator will get about 30% less. There's an easy way around this. Just tie a little string around your finger to remind you to open up a web browser and pay with a normal credit card or PayPal or whatever else. Thanks for watching. Keep creating.